Picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Okay, good morning. Welcome back. It is week 3 on the travel pod, but I wanted to show you some good results over the weekend, lest you think I have soured on 3D printing as a whole. No, these are more subjects from my collection of cartoon robots. I did the Rosie. Tweaky doesn't exactly count as a cartoon, but of course I printed off the Tweaky last week, and I'm just having some fun printing off some stuff. And this was a purchased STL file from Gambody. Look it up. They've got some amazing things. The only thing I would chalk down as a minus on this is that Gambody, they do wonderful things as far as making sure that they offer the FDM or the filament version of a kit, and then the SLA version. And they always make their SLA versions about half the size because they cop to the fact that resin printing can be expensive if you're not hollowing. But it's an easy thing. You buy the files, and then you just blow it up to 200%, and then you're back to where the filament version would be, or 210% if you want to do that. The only knock I'll put against this Bender figure, which is, by the way, an excellent figure, but it's a statue. It's not a kit. The parts don't come separately. When you bought the file, you got the ability to download a folder full of files, but they're all solid. There's a group of the 3 of these characters, and then there are individual characters, but there's not a breakdown of, like, say, Bender's head and the arms as separate pieces. So it's not really a model kit. It's a statue. It's a figure. Be easy enough to go in and slice this up and make an action figure out of it, or at least something more posable, because it's a robot and it's got easy places for you to do that. If I wanted to cut straight across his neck and make that a separate piece, then I could, and make that posable, like I did, sort of like what I did with Tweaky. And that's the only knock. The resin or the filament version of this door is openable, and it's not on the resin version. That's the only knock. I wanted to show that you can get very good, very smooth results. This is an error that's completely my fault. It has to do with not having enough supports on it. But I'm still playing with that. I'm figuring out what's the minimum number of supports I can get away with and that kind of thing. But look at you can appreciate the fine detail on the face and these wiggly antennae, and just how smooth these geometric shapes are. Now, Bender has the one problem that anybody who has action figures knows. Sometimes the feet are too small, and the character doesn't stand on its own feet, and so it needs a stand. That's nothing new. Action figures have been doing it since time began. Oddly enough, the lady bots, even though their feet are even smaller, they stand just fine. They stand just fine on the tiny feet that they are given. So it's hit or miss, literally. The misses are fine. The Bender needs is a little stand, and that's no big deal. But they kind of go together like this as a big pose. And I'll be painting these up probably next week to go on my shelf along with Rosie and some other cartoon robots. But we'll start the week out on a positive note. We don't know how far the rest of the week will go or how positive it will be, because we will be spending it on this and the base for that and the Facehugger, and try not to get ahead of ourselves with other projects down the line. Okay, I've got the desk all cleaned off, the workbench all cleaned off, and I hate to dirty it up again, but it is that time. I have did a little work. I have done a little work on the base over the weekend. We've got to post in. I need to epoxy the Delta shield down. I haven't done that yet. I've painted the interior in here with one of those nice texture paints. Looks like a little bit like a stamped leather there, which makes it look nice. I have to decide what I'm going to do around here. Something I haven't done in a while is I haven't done a nice stain. maybe a nice stain for that would be good rather than trying to paint everything all the time. Hey, welcome back to Woodworking 101. I've got the sanding sealer coat has dried, and now I'm going to put on the first coat of the stain. And this is one of those stain and polyurethanes in one step, so you don't really do the wiping down that you normally would do with a stain, where you would, put the stain on, let it sit for a couple minutes, and then wipe it off. 2 coats are recommended. Using a natural bristle brush, dip in inches of blah, 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 blah. Okay, let the first coat dry 6 hours or more. Wow. Okay, brush on a second thin coat. So I guess this is going to be the only thing we do today on this guy. So we're going to put the first thin coat on, or the first coat on, and see how she goes. Alrighty, the first coat of stain is on, and I'm just going to move this to another room so that I can get on with the business of working on the pod itself. I'm kind of glad I did this morning, because if it takes all day to dry, then it can be drying in the other room while I'm off doing my regular stuff. I don't have to be, twiddling my thumbs waiting for this to dry. And this will sit something like that. I also I looked around through my inventory and realized I was woefully low on 9-volt transformers, particularly 9-volt transformers that had any sort of amperage to them. So I had to dash off an order to Amazon to send for some more of those, which hopefully will be coming by the end of the week, and then I can wire this straight into here, and I'll do something temporary if I don't get the actual transformer done in time for the end of the week, but I can go ahead and wire everything but that. And like I said, I could put something temporary in to finish it off, but I need to get a dedicated cord for this. Okay, before I could start painting of any sort on this pod, I need to make some masks. I need to mask these these important windows here, or not windows, but the inspection lights. There's a red one here, and then this strip, and then everything around the front. I can just cut some strips and put over top of that, I'm pretty sure. But before I start going willy-nilly with the spray, I need to guard those, and I think I'll just use regular painter's tape on this front window. It's big enough that I can trim it off fairly easy. Alrighty, I've got the areas that I want to keep clean masked off. Those include the side strips, and when I make these vinyl masks, I design it for one side, and I then mirror it to the other side, because I trust that things are going to be symmetrical. Well, foolish me. This side is longer than this side, and that tells me everything I need to know about the model maker, the designer of this. If he couldn't be bothered to make this the same length as that, then I know my symmetry is off to begin with. Okay, good gravy. No, a good gray coat, and it's time for this to dry for a bit. Boy, you can see the fact that it's supposed to be sitting flush on the docking ring, and you can see how it's leaning over to this side. That tells me that that back wall is bowed. The docking ring is not sitting flush with the rest of the kit. Livable though, livable. Good morning everybody, it's Tuesday, welcome back, and the primer coat on the travel pod has had a chance to dry overnight, and I am looking now. I can see some spots that need to be sanded in, and also a little bit more putty put into them, so I'm just going around and I'm spot checking to see things that might still need a little bit of putty. I'll go ahead and put that in and let it sit for another half a day or so, and come back and sand that. But this should be like the last, I think this will be the last round of puttying I'll need to do, and then we should be able to get on with the serious business of painting here. I don't know if see, this is something that also that by careful puttying and letting it sit and then coming back to it, I don't know if these cracks are still forming or whether they were always there. If the resin is continuing to shrink and it is still active, then we might get some cracks developing. And that'll tell us something too about the stability of the medium here, or lack thereof. So, you know, the worst thing you could do would be to spend all this time and energy and love on something and then have it just sit there on the corner, on the shelf, and just start cracking spontaneously because of the compression of the material. That's what you're dealing with when you're dealing with untested medium. Now everyone knows like the tolerances of styrene and the tolerances of casted resin, because it's been around for years and we kind of know it. It's a known thing. But we don't know how this 3D printed material will react over time, because frankly, at least for the consumer end of these things, there hasn't been the time. I know that 3D materials have been in existence for a while in the industrial side and the commercial side, but the longevity of those pieces is in question, because as I understand it, 3D in industrial 3D is used in the mock-up business and the mold making business, and those are temporary use things. They're not meant to stand the test of time, so I don't know how well you can say any of that lasts. Okay, I'm also going to putty in this some of this. Well, actually, no, it looks pretty good without it. I got to do the underside of it, but I don't have to putty the length of this bar across the front like I was afraid of I might have to. So let me just finish up puttying these cracks and I'll get back to you. Okay, time for a complete change of pace. Now that the travel pod has been puttied and it is drying in the other room, actually in another part of this room, I'm going to turn my attention to the Facehugger, and I think this is what I'm going to be enjoying, because I can get a little bit more freeform with it, since there have been so many different iterations of the Facehugger and varieties and all of that. There's not really a hard, fast canon as to what they can look like. I mean, we've seen several examples, most predominantly in the first movie. But they've been changed here and there to, every time there's a new Alien movie, it seems like they take another pass at the design. So I'm feeling a little bit more liberty to do what I want to do on this one for myself. So now that I've got this flush colored in here, I'm going to take some browns and play up some of the accents and the shadows. Okay, I've just mixed up what I call a kitchen sink color, and that's basically glopping together everything that you have just a tiny bit left in the bottom of your jar, and you're going to get a muddy brown. But a muddy brown is what I want. And even to the point where I'm using my dirty thinner. Yes, everybody should have a jar of dirty thinner. I mean, after you pour your dirty thinner, it still thins, and you can thin your dark colors with it just as easily as you can with clean thinner. I keep a jar of clean thinner over there, see? There's the jar of clean thinner. Zoom in on the clean thinner. See, there's the clean thinner. This is my dirty thinner. I'm using my dirty thinner this time. Zoom back out. So I've made up a good juicy coat of kitchen sink brown, and I'm mixing it up nicely and diluting it with the dirty thinner. And I'm just going to load the brush up, and I'm going to hit the shadows. Okay, now you can start to see some life coming into this guy. It's not all that flat color anymore. I've just been putting on some shades and some shadows, and now I'm in with my old friend the ComArts, and I'm using a light rust combination with some mouth flesh to give it a more pinkish hue. And then I can put some sickly yellows over top of it, but I am just adding all kinds of flavor into the shadows here, and I'm determining whether or not I want to put any spots or anything on it. I kind of like the little stripey look I got going on, but before I muddy this up too much, I like to do a pass like this and then step back, take a break from it, come back to it, see how I like it, and then determine my next pass from there. I've worked in on the mouth area here, and of course I'll be doing some dry brushing and some highlighting over top of that, make that even redder. But right now I'm just throwing in a good base color. And like I said, this is one of those subjects where it's tough to go wrong on it. You're making it your own. So if you want to go more greens and reptile, you could. I'm going with more of a flesh colored spectrum on it, and I'm liking that. And I'm going to do some kind of a slime coat with the weathering with the Vallejo weathering paints over top of it to give it a good glopping. But I don't know. And then if I spray it with a high gloss, then that'll lock that in, and that'll give me the wet shimmery coat that I'm looking for. Yeah, this is the type of day I like, where I'm bouncing around from one project to the next. So Facehugger is doing a bit of drying and self-reflection there, and I am back on the pod base. And this is how the stain dried from yesterday. I've got this guy to put down, and before I can do that, I want to wire this switch in, because once the switch is wired in, then this is locked in place, and then I can put some epoxy on the back of this and get some clamps out and kind of clamp it down flat to the top and go from there. I've got the Delta clamped down. I've got some epoxy on the back of it, and I've got it clamped down to the base. Got some oozing problems of the epoxy oozing out, so don't know exactly how I will treat that yet. I perhaps will have to spray it with a flat coat to get rid of that. But we've got the switch in and wired, and we'll let this post heal, let that take care of itself, and we'll set it aside. Playing around with ideas for the base for the Facehugger, and I had been thinking of this idea in the back of my head. I was just trying to figure out the best way to implement it, of this broken piece of conduit here, and fiber optic conduit, that I could put a little light and a little pizzazz into this base here. And I was thinking that if I can find the right paints and the right effects, that I might like to make it look as if this conduit had a big old melted acid spot in it, like some alien blood had gotten on it and had melted away the conduit here. So that's what I'm playing with now. I'm just thinking about the best way to realize this idea. Looks a bit like a old coax cable, but blown up very large. I've got insulation, I've got 2 pipes. The third one will run in the center, and then all the fiber optics will come out of that. So we're going to see how far this idea gets carried down the road. Hello everybody, it is Wednesday. Another day gone by. They are going by so quickly at this end of the year. But here we go. I'm working on the shuttle. I almost said shuttle. The travel pod, and I've just done a last bit of sanding on the Bondo that I put, or spot putty I put on yesterday. I've got the docking ring masked off because I don't want to get any errant paint on that. Plus it gives me a good surface to rest it on as I am painting. I want to hit this with a coat of the white primer now. I'm done with my gray primers. I can go on to my body color. And I am looking to do a white, a white primer so that I can do like the creamy color off-white, and then we'll be ready to start accentuating these panels. Alrighty, the pod has had its first successful white primer coat, probably its only white primer coat, and it's drying in the other room. And I'm turning my attention back to the base that I glued this down yesterday, and it's all nice and set up and beautiful. However, it has left little bits of resin, or I'm sorry, not resin, but epoxy, where the it had splooshed out. So I'm thinking I might want to visit that with a flat matte varnish to see if I can get rid of that glossiness. And my voice is shaking because I am shaking this little wee jar of matte varnish. I knew a matte varnish in high school. Nice guy. Let's do this, and I'll give you a sneak peek of what else is on the agenda. This is the head of the Razor Crest, and I'm attempting to do a resin print of it. It is not going well. Parts are failing because they are so delicate that that the tiny detail is not being captured adequately. I may have to blow this up, enlarge it so that the delicate parts are thicker, but that would make it huge. So I'm debating whether to do that or not. The news is I checked my emails, and my updated delivery on my power transformers and plugs has been updated to tomorrow instead of Friday. So hopefully well, if they do come tomorrow, then I'll have that day to finish the wiring. We might have the final wiring installed. Okay, so I'm painting on the Facehugger here, and I was running into a problem that I wasn't liking, and that was all of the colors were coming out too soft, too airbrushed. So I'm going in here with a dry brush, just dipping into the airbrush cup and putting on some hard edges to the paint. And I think that's what I'm missing. It's just some hard edges. Pull this little stand out of here. This is what I've been using to prop him up in the right position. But what this is doing is it's giving me some harsh highlights, and I kind of like that. And if I do too much of it, I can go back over it with the airbrush and tone some of them down. But it was getting too soft looking. So now that I've got this, I think what I'd like to do is go into the recesses with a wash again. I definitely want to see how this dries in, but it looks like the winner is going to be the oil stain, the engine oil stain from Vallejo. Everything else that I had was too green, and I don't want to put I don't want to introduce a lot of green into the Facehugger. If anything, thank you, Mr. Compressor. If anything, it was a sickly, pale yellow, fleshy type of color, going towards the browns in the spectrum, not necessarily towards the green. So green, I think, is just a cliche for the bug-eyed monster, and I'm trying to avoid that. So again, I think the winner is going to be even these grimies. There's streaking grime, and there was a grimy dark, and this one is, yeah, streaking grime. Those tended to go towards the green end of the spectrum, and they were no bueno. So and the petrol spill is almost too much of a bluish gray or bluish black, and I think maybe that was a little bit too far the other way. So I think the winner is going to be this one, and I like the way as it puddles and pools, it's, you keep the darker color. I still think I want to hit this with the Calm Arts because I have more color choice there, but then maybe throw this oil stain on top of the whole deal when I'm done. And now that I can see what kind of a cast the oil stain is throwing on everything, I can kind of overcompensate. Excuse me, I've been trying to hold that sneeze in. I was maybe I can overcompensate and make this a little bit brighter, and then knowing that the oil stain will dull it down or darken it up, it will come out in the long run closer to my original conception. So I just put a little bit on here and then let her run. it picks up all the colors that were underneath too. The tail has not gotten near the amount of attention that it should have. I need to put some more striations and variations in there too. Okay, I think this is a fine place to leave it for the lunch break. Let that dry, and then we'll come back and see what parts we need to touch up. I still would like to have it overall a little bit lighter. Now it looks lighter on camera than it actually is. So I'm gonna let this sit for a while, see how it dries, and then we'll decide whether we need to come back and just mist it with a lighter coat to brighten up the color. Well, say what you will about Jeff Bezos, he runs a good company. I gotta tell you, the transformers that were originally supposed to come Friday, and then I found email in my box that said they would be here tomorrow, have arrived today. It's Wednesday. I've got new transformers. Yay! And here's the plugs to make them go. So lovely. I am going to be powering ships for quite a while. So now I can work on getting the base all wired up. Even the compressor is happy. These are 9-volt 1 amp. Yes, these are 9-volt 1 amp Arduino transformers, which will be fine. Normally I got to go for 1.5 amps, but this only has a few lights on it. It's not that spectacularly draining, but nice long plug. And the socket for which I can, see, just like that. Oops, just like that. Now I can bury this in the base and we will be good to go. Okay, so I'm working on the base for the Facehugger, and I have been chasing down an idea that I think is pretty neat. So it's I've been letting the pod dry while I'm doing this. Basically what I'm doing is I'm making this fiber optic conduit that can sit on the base behind the Facehugger, and this could be from a space station or a piece of a spaceship or whatever. But I'm going to run some various lighting effects so it looks like it's a broken off, or perhaps even a melted, acid blood melted piece of conduit. And I think if it's sit behind the Facehugger on the base, it will give a little extra zing to that and dress it up a little bit, since it's something you can't necessarily put lights in. But what I've got is I think I've worked it out to where I can take this inner core, put this little 12-volt battery holder in just like that on the end of this piece of PVC pipe, and then I'll have a switch that comes out to maybe the back lid here, so that when this shoves into here, you can see it coming out of the back here, and all I have to do is pull it out this way, change the battery, push it back in, put the lid on it, and it's ready to go. I'll dress this edge up a little bit. I think it's a little bit too neatly cut. I think I'd like to get in there with a Dremel and rip that up a little bit, but in such a way that when this is set, you will get some lighting going on here. Now you can't see it very well here, but maybe one of the strands will be white, maybe one will be red, maybe one will be one of those color changing LEDs that flashes through some stuff. But I'll trim these all down so they don't look too uniform. Okay, I've put the fiber optic cable aside for a moment because I want to talk about the pod. And it's time to start cracking into some paint for this. And as with all things, when you're looking to paint something that existed, you find your references. You pull out the DVD or the Blu-ray or any pictures you can find. Well, this has become my new reference. Star Trek Inside the Art and Visual Effects. Jeff Bond, Gene Koziski, Pizicki. Sorry. Jeff Bond, friend of the show, all around good egg. Excellent pictures. Excellent pictures provided in here on the pod. Now, the only difference between this travel pod and the final version that you see here is that they've added some detail into the area where this was once one big horseshoe light that went all the way around it. And I think they realized once they got that up on the stage that that light was going to be distracting if it wasn't buffeted somehow. So they put in these louvers to make it a little bit more directional, a little bit more interesting, and they chopped it into sections basically. But this is 99% there. So that's what I'm going to be using for my color references and for my panel breakdowns and things like that. And particularly this 3/4 view of the finished shot. This was the miniature with the little Scotty inside. This was the they also rear projected film footage. This is the film footage that they shot on the full-size set, and then they projected it into there. So this is going to be a great bit of references, and basically all it is cool whites and warm whites and a little lambsy ivy. No, cool whites and warm whites and some very light grays in here. So I think what I'd like to do would be sort of like what I've done on the 2001 pod, and I did the same thing on the Discovery, which was to go ahead and paint panels rather distinctly, and then go back over it with a blending white coat, which kind of blended it all back together. Okay, I think I've done enough for today. I've just gone in and taken some warm gray or some warm whites and some JN gray or JA gray and medium gray, and just did some faux paneling on all of these raised bits, and then I'll let that go, and then tomorrow I'll come back in and do a blending coat over all of that. Then we can start painting in the details. Okay, just as an experiment, I am putting the pod on its stand so that I can see how everything's going to come together. I think that's the right height. Yeah, you still get to see the wonderful chevron. If it was any lower, you wouldn't get to see all that. Now it makes me wish I had a detail, something that lit that up. No, it's too late to throw anything in there to do that. But that is looking sweet. And tomorrow we will get the base coat painted, get it all finished out, and then try to perhaps paint the details on. Okay, welcome back, kids. It is Thursday. The week is flying by, and hopefully we'll get a lot of painting done on this pod today. Okay, it is time to lighten up this travel pod, and to do that, my paint of choice is the Vallejo Mecca Off-White. It's the same color I used on the Millennium Falcon for a base color. It is a nice creamy white without being overly beige. So I'm just going to do a nice light blending coat, and then I'll come back over it in successive coats till I have blended everything down to the level that I prefer. It's also got a nice smell to it. And it does dry a little bit more opaque once it goes on, so you kind of have to let it, put your coat on and then spray and then walk away and come back and see how well it's brightened up, because it does not cover as much at the point of impact. It does dry a little thicker. Now the fun thing is we just sit here and let it dry for a bit. I start rounding up my colors for the detail painting. There's a lot of black on here. A lot of black that needs to be painted. This area here, this area, there's a square here. Of course, all of the insets for the lights. So there's a lot of black that needs to be painted. Okay, I just touched up a little bit of the second coat of the off-white, and I'm letting it dry. This side didn't get quite as much as the other, so we're letting that settle in. And once this is all dry, I think I'm going to put a clear coat over it, just a light clear, or light satin clear coat over it, kind of lock those colors in, and then we can start with the detail painting. I'm taking a break while the clear coat is drying on the travel pod to work some more on this fiber optic cable for the Facehugger base. Got everything, I think, pretty much lined up. Just doing some soldering now. This is what's I'm going to trim these down, but this is what's going to stick out of that side of the cable, and it'll do something like that. Like I say, once I get on the base, I can go through and trim out these individual fibers, and then the whole thing shoves down into here, and then goes into that casing I was working on yesterday. And here is, let's see, I need to make sure that the wiring I put on the end of this bundle here is long enough that I can pull this out to change the battery and then shove it back in. So I just need to build some slack into that. Alrighty, the black highlights are on. These guys here on both sides. And we'll let that dry, and then we'll move on to see what the next color could be. Okay, I've just put on the last little bits of black detailing. Now the red stripe is going to go up around all this, and I'll probably end up painting those again, but for now that'll do. And I'm wondering if I should take this off and repaint these areas now. See, the red stripe goes there. Yeah, I could go ahead and take those off and touch that black paint up. Okay, I think a good spot to finish up for today is the fact that I got the front stripes painted black, and I also painted in the viewport. Just a nice gaskety black around that. So, everything else is like some washes and some grays and a couple of silver accents here and there. Maybe I'll do that. I can hit some of those high points with some silver, and then nothing will be left but to doing the striping. Hello and welcome back. It is Friday. It is the last work day of the week, and it's a busy day. It's a busy day. Got an order in last night that I am starting to work on, because that's what keeps the lights on around here. And also, so that's going on. I had spent my morning like I've been spending most other mornings this week, and that is getting up early and cleaning parts that have come off of the 3D printer. I find it's easier just to let those things print at night. You know, I set it up with some resin before I go to bed. It's in the other room. It's venting to the outside. Well, when I use the big printer, it's venting to the outside. The small printer, the Photon, doesn't put out the fumes that the Transform does. So that's just good to go in a closed off room. But when I'm running both of them, I certainly have the exhaust fan going and venting to the outside, so I can kind of put that in the side room and let that do its thing while I am dreaming of other models to build. And then I get up in the morning and I pull the parts off of the printers and I clean them up. So that's what I did this morning, and now it's time to turn my attention back to Shea Travel Pod here. And the fact that I've got an order coming in which is going to tie up the vinyl cutter means that in between projects, or in between plots, I need to plot off some stuff that will help me finish painting this. So that's going to mean a lot of curves and a lot of thin pinstriping strips, so that I can help paint those by using the vinyl, which is what I was planning. And then masks for the O5s because I think I want to paint the 05s on rather than just using vinyl or trying to find decals, because I don't have any ready-made 05 decals around here. I'm playing with the stripe here, and I think the best way to handle this is to put down a positive stripe first and then make my measurements off of that. So pretend this yellow stripe here is the top red stripe. Now there is a even finer second stripe that goes underneath that, and then there's another red stripe that's about as fat as this along the bottom. So what I'm doing is checking my measurements and all of my curves and all of that on a positive stripe. Then what I will do is put the pinstriping on either side of it to mask it, peel this up, and then I'll have a perfect space for the red stripe to go underneath it. So that's what I'm doing now, and I've just gone through my second iteration to try to make sure I get this curve right and my numbers the right size. I had the numbers way too big the first time. I liked them, but they were, like I said, they were way too big. So best thing to do is just try them out, and if you don't like it, you size it down and you run another one. Yeah, I've come to the sterling conclusion that I'm going to have to paint this bottom stripe first and then remove all the tape and then paint the top stripe. I just can't. As much tape as on here and as delicate as this is, I just can't flip it over and then put all the tape all on the top. So I've got the bottom area masked off, knowing full well that I'll have to touch this black up again. I think what I'm going to do is get the red paint out. Okay, the bottom red stripe has been painted. I'll give this a second or two to dry before I remove the tape. I would like to put the 05, there's an 05 here that I believe is red as well. So I can go ahead and put that in, and then I can remove the rest of all of this. But was being very careful not to overspray, because you know how I go with red paint. So let this sit for a bit and then start removing tape. Well, I am quite happy with that. Now there will be some touching up by hand I need to do, but that is the bottom stripe. Now you'll notice that it comes to a different point on these three black boxes than it does on these three black boxes, but then checking some reference, those black boxes aren't on both sides. So this pod really is kind of a mishmash of all different references, so I don't feel too bad about any of it. But here is the bottom, and as I said, I'm going to have to touch up where some whites and some reds, and that might be today is Friday. Ooh, that might be something that gets done next week. Okay, so I just finished doing the top. This also would be in the way if I was trying to paint these top stripes, so I can go ahead and get this done and let it be drying while I am taking a bit of a break. But this one was fairly easy enough to do because everything is a pretty straight line, except for the circle, but even that's an easy mask to make. And I just needed to remember to chip the paint back off of that strobe. The only thing I need to be really careful about is when I'm removing these tapes and these masks that I do not get any wet red paint. I don't fold it back on itself and put a spot of red paint on the model where I don't want it. And there we go. Nice red popsicle stick. Nice red circle on a stick. So now we can set it aside and let it dry. Okay, so I'm back from my lunch break, and I have masked the top stripe off. And now all I need to do is to remove the areas, or remove these two stripes where the red paint goes, and that is this one. And then there is this one. And I should be ready to mask off from below and above and then spray the red paint on. Okay, last of the red striping going down. I've got this area taped off. I swear it may be, if nothing else, at least the stripe is straight. The plating goes up and down and all around in there, and I think it has more to do with the unevenness of the resin printed part and the miscalculations on the actual pieces. But outside of, there is some bridge striping that goes on this back wall. We're just going to have to see whether that gets done or not, because if these parts don't line up to that, then I'm not going to bend over backwards to try to make that fit. So let's do the last of the red striping, and see, after that would be the number. That's all that's left, or the big 05s. Okay, I'm removing the masking now. The red has had a chance to dry. Okay, so far so good. Okay, now the important one in the center. This is going to tell me how clean that white pinstripe is between the two segments of red striping. I'm just doing a little bit of cleanup here. There's no sense in rushing this. Letting it dry is in everybody's best interest. Just doing a tiny bit of dressing up here. Now, the last thing to do, other than the hand touch-up stuff, would be the numbers. So I have to determine whether I should try to paint the red stripe around the tiny text. You know, that's that font that's got it's black with a red stripe around it. And it may be difficult to paint that. I would ideally like to have a decal of it, but that's not where we're at. So let's see how this looks. Ooh, so far so good. Now we can do some touch up of the white. Oh yeah, buddy. That's pretty. Ain't nobody's business but my own, but that is pretty. Okay, I've just spent the last hour or so putting the red on the back side of the rear panel of the travel pod. Now, I did not carry the second pinstripe because I like myself, and I don't want to make myself go crazy, and it's not it's hard enough to get these lines to match up without putting a second white pinstripe in there. So you take what you get and you don't fuss a bit. So now I am ready to do all of the white and gray touch-ups, and that just leaves the number. I don't know how well it's going to work, but I'm trying something here. We've got the 5 down. I've pulled up the mask for where the red goes. I will put the black, no, I will put the numbers back over the black so that I can spray the red. But first, before I empty out the brush, I want to go ahead and put the 5 on this side. This is some downright fiddly work here. Okay, I have very carefully replaced the 05, where the black paint was, and I am ready to spray the red outline. So cross your fingers, your toes, and anything else. See how this works. This could be nice, or it could be a disaster. I know which way I'm betting. Yeah, we're probably going to have to do some very fine touch-up painting. But still better than trying to do it all freehand. Okay, there are the numbers. Okay. Oh, do I deserve that? Did I live that good of a life? You know, the crying shame is, if this kit had been designed with the plates not being as fat and not being as thick, this would have come out a whole lot better. But look at that. There's nothing in there that I can't do a quick touch up on. The front edge of that 5 is all that's all that's not painted. But look at that. And here, gentle beings, is where we end this week's work. Look at them. Got the 05 on that side. I got the 05 on this side. I've got a lot of little niggly, tiny, touch white paint and gray paint to touch up, and I've got a little bit of hand painting on the red stripes to kind of clean up some smudges on that. But that will, and then of course mounting it to the base and all that can be handled on next week's episode. So that's a darn good place to leave it, I think. It is coming along. Okay, here we are on the 2 projects for this week. Getting down to the wire on both of them, but neither one is quite finished. Of course, the Facehugger in the back, and I'm working on that optical piece of cable there. And we've got the travel pod up on the base just to show you what it looks like, but of course not wired in. And that's going to bring us to the end of week 3 on our couple of projects, the Facehugger and the travel pod. A lot of work got done. A lot of work got done this week. More work yet to do. Almost finished. But the thing that I like about it is that it gives me enough time to bounce back and forth. You're doing very hard line, very precise work on the travel pod, and then you turn around and you slot paint with a 1-inch brush for the Facehugger, and it's very freeform and very impressionistic. And then you do something like this, where I'm working on this. No, it doesn't look like an explosive, but this will be this bundled bit of fiber optic cable to go on the base to liven up the Facehugger. And then you bounce back and forth between that and what I've got cooking in the printers. So it's been a jumble of a week. So I'm glad you've been around to stick with it. And next week, week 4, certainly we should finish at least these 2 projects and maybe start a couple of more. So until next week, you be good to each other, stay safe, go out and vote if you have early voting in your area, do your civic duty, and we'll talk to you next time.